Good day, Joanne. How the heck are you?
Good morning, Rylan. Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm swell. Monday morning, actually feeling pretty good. And let's dive into this. This is going to be a fun conversation. We know each other from the mentorship. Always love
Mhm.
talking to coaches that are in the industry. But I want you to tell your story. I don't really do much of an intro. I love the person to intro themselves. So why don't you tell people who you are and how you got to do what you're doing now?
Okay. Well, my name is Joanne. Most people call me Joe. Uh, I got into the health and fitness coaching part of it pretty late in the game. I hadn't ever really touched a weight till I was in my late 40s. I'd been working in manufacturing as an executive assistant and then in marketing. And actually, at a very, very low point in my life, started weight training with an amazing coach who was just opening up a facility in our tiny little town. And I saw very quickly what getting stronger did for me, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And I'm a very enthusiastic, outgoing person. I don't like to hold back. And in the gym, I could fully be myself. I felt like for the first time, it was like me unleashed. And so a couple months into it, I approached the owner, head coach. His name's Matt Manti, awesome guy. And I said, I could help you with this business. I have a lot of experience in business administration. So, excuse me, I did help him with that for about a year. And then I approached him and said, I would love to coach. Do you see potential in me? And he's been mentoring me ever since. So, I went from being behind a desk for 25 years to strength training to being a coach. And I absolutely love it. My passion is helping the average person, the average Joe, find their way to being fit, strong, and healthy, whatever that looks like for them, and really embracing the concept of making the most out of your life and not being limited by what other people say or what you've been told that you should or should not do. So that's kind of me in a nutshell: is enthusiasm, optimism, and wanting to help people.
That's beautiful. That's why we get into this industry. There's something that calls upon a person, and it's really a powerful motivator, not just for yourself to stay in the game, but when you get to see that impact that you can make directly for someone, and that's something someone had provided you prior. Now let's dive into that transition because it doesn't happen overnight that you fall in love with
No.
fitness and you are stuck behind a desk and then it's like all of a sudden it starts to click. And I think that could speak to a lot of people. So let's talk about that transition. What were some of the difficult parts for you? Like you're behind the desk, you're trying to get into fitness. What were some of the big, obstacles along the way that you had to kind of realize and challenge yourself to get over?
Well, I think the first big obstacle was thinking I was in fairly good shape. Physically, I thought I was, but the years of sitting behind a desk, I've always been fairly active. We like to bike, hike, walk. I had been in martial arts for 10 years, had some knee issues, some limiting factors there, but it was more. I think the biggest stumbling block to me was actually the mental side of it. I was in a very toxic work environment, manufacturing oil and gas, which in Alberta can be a very toxic culture. And I think of myself as being a very strong and confident woman, but I didn't realize how much I was being beaten down by the environment I was in. And I had lost pretty much all my self confidence, although I didn't really know that. Emotionally, I was in terrible shape, and I moved to a different job, which I thought was better. Turned out it was slightly better, but still extraordinarily toxic. I got laid off from that job, and I wasn't hired back, and that was crushing. When you've spent 20, 25 years doing a job that I was really good at it, and I helped people who were very rich make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But not being hired back and knowing deep down that it was because of who I was and what I stood for and what I would no longer stand for, was really crushing. And I admit I was in a pretty deep depression after that, probably heading towards some very poor coping skills. I was sleeping hardly at all, so I was using sleeping pills, becoming very dependent on them looking back. But just before I was let go from that second position, I was a marketing director. I took some fitness classes at a local college because, I've always tried to stay somewhat active. And it was there that I met Matt Manti. And he told me he was going to be opening up his own facility. At that point, I thought I was going to be hired back at my other job. And a month later, he contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm opening up this fitness studio in our tiny little one-horse town." And I thought, well, if I have time with my other job, I'll continue. I wasn't hired back, which, looking, at the history, it's a good thing I wasn't, because it freed me up. It freed me up to basically find my way back to health. And I give him a lot of credit for the environment he created there, the positivity, the encouragement. I remember sitting and talking with him and saying, I don't really care what the scale says, because I really didn't. I'm not a small woman. I'm 5'10". So that scale isn't going to be a small number. But I said, I want to see how strong I can get. In the back of my mind, I thought, I think I'm pretty strong already. Absolutely not. But when you start picking up heavy things and putting them down and picking them up again and putting them down, and day after day, I realized that while I was in there, that 45 to 60 minutes, I didn't think about how miserable I felt. I didn't think about how defeated I felt or how beaten down I was. I started feeling empowered. And it was through helping him with kind of some of the business admin stuff that I realized, this is the first CEO I've ever worked for and with that has a high level of integrity, and I can see myself thriving here. And then I started seeing what coaches can do for people and the difference they make in lives. And I thought, man, if I could support that, like what an incredible way to use my enthusiasm. Like, I could unleash all of this in there, not have to, pull it back, not have to try and dim it so that I didn't hurt other people's egos. And so that's kind of how I transitioned into, from being an executive assistant and in marketing in this very fast-paced, extremely wealthy environment, to focusing on helping people and empowering people and, helping them find their confidence again.
Right. I really love that. Confidence beats on performance. It really gets lost so much in fitness. And I do think that we're seeing the tide shift. More women are like, I want to be strong. More women are saying, I want to strength train, and seeing the value of it. But it's still a very muddled and quiet voice, but it's getting louder. And what people need to understand is that it's a long game if you have weight loss to do, right? It's just, if you're planning on maintaining the weight loss, it's not going to be fast. And the process is going to be key to maintaining that health result. Even if you had no weight to lose, as you mentioned, you weren't even focused on the weight loss. You're just focused on feeling better. And that just made you want to show up, right? Because you have this, it's almost like instant gratification. It's not quite, but it is way better than the delayed gratification it takes to see the big health picture, to see the long-term weight loss, to see all the really big results. But if you show up each week, you can actually see some pretty decent gains in strength training for a very long time. You have to be a very experienced lifter to start seeing strength plateaus. So when you're new to the gym, it's exhilarating when you can go from, just starting with a goblet squat, and then you have more weight on the goblet squat. And then someone introduces you to barbell work, and you're like, wow, I went from holding no weight in front of me, 20 pounds, to over 100 pounds on my back in the course of a matter of months. Like, literally, that's how much you can have change. It makes you want to show up. The thing I really find interesting about your story, and I've interviewed other coaches around this, is that there are just some toxic work environments that in the, just whether it's administration, just anything that's behind a desk. And if that you're not in some way really immersed in your work with some gratitude, like you really feel like accomplished from what you're doing, it is soul crushing. It is just, it's so difficult to go through your day. And I'm fairly certain a good percentage of the population deals with that. And, if people can appreciate, like, it's not like everyone can get out of that work environment, but I think your message is really important there that, well, just know that you have an environment you can control for 45 minutes to 60 minutes out of the day. And you can be really empowered by that environment. You get to control way more parameters in that. And the other major key thing there, even though, we're online trainers as well, and I know that's predominantly where I go, I've been very familiar with the environment, and getting that support is so key. Do you feel like that was a big part, I'm assuming it was, of your transition? I think like more people need to know they need to transition in the welcoming environment to not be siloed in it.
Oh, absolutely. I saw that we do some at that time it was just group classes. We've, as the business has developed, we now offer some more semi-private personal training, some very, very small group training. At that time it was group fitness and all strength training and some cardio as well. But what I saw was that it didn't matter your age, it didn't matter what shape you were in, it didn't matter if you had some experience or no experience. It didn't matter if you'd been on the couch for the last 10 years. When you walked through that door, you were welcomed and you were wanted and you were appreciated just for being there. I hadn't experienced that in a lot of places before. And the coaching was genuine and authentic. It wasn't, we didn't have coaches who were just there for their own ego. It was the bottom line was to help people. And that kind of an environment, that kind of a supportive community is something I really hadn't experienced before in in any setting, like where literally anybody could come in. And from once you were in and welcomed and supported, then it was on you to make this work. Because if you're going to show up and be a jerk, well, that's not going to be tolerated. If you're going to show up and be, you're going to be toxic or you're going to beat people down, that's not tolerated. And that was the first environment I had been in when, if you genuinely show up, you want to work hard and you're a good, decent person, you thrive. There's nothing holding you back. The only thing holding you back then is going to be you. And I love that. It's really driven home for me that surrounding yourself with the right kind of people, not just, the shredded, jacked, where fitness is their life and that's all that they live for. No, not that. But people who want you to succeed and people who themselves want to succeed and people who want to work hard and aren't just looking for the quick results. I mean, like you said, when you're new at this, I vividly remember about 6 weeks into strength training, I was putting some product in my hair and I stopped and I looked in the mirror and I thought, well, hello, bicep. I had never seen that before, instead of just kind of like a noodle arm, I saw like there was something popping there. And I vividly remember the feeling of seeing that hard work in a short period of time, and like you said, in for the long game. So now it's not so much about, week to week. It's more like year to year now, adding maybe one more chin up or, whatever it is, being able to do something I couldn't do before, even at a very basic level. It's a continual, learning curve. It's continual striving for something that I find absolutely exhilarating.
That's the big thing that people need to understand. That it is exciting. It's
Yeah.
exhilarating. I think I love hearing that. And actually, for some context, Joanne, how old were you when you made this transition to really get involved in fitness?
Really getting involved in strength training. I was in my late 40s.
That's
Um,
super important for people to hear.
oh, yeah. Like, I mean, if I was going to pinpoint an age, I think I was 48.
Wow.
Um, and I will be 57 in November. So, 48, 49, maybe 49, because I do vividly remember wanting to celebrate my 50th birthday in the gym, which I did with like a hard workout. Um,
Love that.
that's one thing that I'm really seeing. I think with my life experience, my age, so often people think it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, they look at social media and they see these 20 something fitness models. And they think, well, I'm never going to look like that, or I can't do that. I've got, 3 kids, or I work full time. I can't live in the gym. You don't have to. It is never too late. You can start in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and you can get stronger. You don't have to strive to do, a strongman competition, or, be part of a CrossFit competition, or be a bikini model, or whatever it is you think you have to do. You can just go and find out what you can do. And I remember telling Matt that one of my goals was to do a chin up. I'd never ever been able to do a chin up. I'm quite tall. I've got long arms. I got really long legs. I knew that was going to be hard, but in my mind, I thought, yeah, in about 3-4 months, I'll be able to do a chin up. And he smiled and he says, yeah, that's definitely possible. About a year. And I thought, what? What do you mean a year? It's not going to take me a year. And yeah, it was almost exactly a year. And so it also taught me the perseverance and patience, and which martial arts had done that as well. But I had one specific goal, and it was to pull myself up to that bar. And that is actually my favorite thing to coach, is that chin up, because so many women will say, I'd love to be able to do a chin up. And when they clear that bar, 99% of the time, the look on their face and the celebration that happens afterwards, like to be able to be a small part of that is such a highlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment. So many women, and I'll even put a lot of most average size men these days, because most people are overweight. It's a huge thing to be able to do a pull-up. And I've always had this adage about pull-ups is when people say, oh, I couldn't do a pull-up to save my life. I'm like, well, here's the funny thing. That could save your life. Now, it's not super probable, but I started to realize, I used to think of like a National Lampoon's, like you're putting on something for some reason, you might almost slip and fall on a roof and you need to pull yourself up. But I actually think the most likely scenario, and there's probably others, is if you are caught in a basement and you need to get out of a window, the only way to do that is to pull yourself out of that window. And
good point.
Yeah. And so I actually was on a construction site. We're just redoing this basement, and we had to finish up like pouring concrete in. And once the concrete's out, you have to get a ladder and you have to pull yourself out. Well, I was one of the only ones that could do it easily, even for all the guys that do construction work that are strong. Not to mention our boss, who owned the company, is a very large man. We needed 3 of us to pull him up. And so if that was a fire, like that's terrible, right? And as you mentioned, for women, it's even harder genetically. Like you just don't get the upper body strength. You have a ton of lower body weight because naturally you carry more in your hips and your legs. And so it's already so difficult, but having that goal is so helpful. Like it's, even if it's a year, but like you say, the experience of finally getting it. And just to cap off on what you mentioned about the age thing is like, people don't realize that you get to have a younger next year. When you come from nothing, when you come from not being fit, the next year is better. Like you are a younger person because you're aging significantly better. And so people think, I had this debate just last week with one of my dad's work buddies, and he's like, oh, well, his knee's really messed up. Yeah, he doesn't train. Oh, well, there's no cartilage, but he doesn't train. Like you can't just blame the injury for his, inability to do any training for his injury to be an issue. You have enough muscle and there's going to be far less issues. And they're also just saying there's no cartilage. They have no idea, right? They're just saying that it's no cartilage. Like, what's that judgment call? But let's dive into this, because maybe women could understand the progression on pull-ups. I think this is a really cool idea to talk about, because so many women want to do pull-ups. What were the stages of progression that you took almost at 50 or around the age of 50 in order to do your very first pull-up?
I had to consistently show up to those strength training sessions, and I had to work hard. I think that's a concept that a lot of women, not that we don't know how to work hard, but when it comes to our own health and fitness, pushing yourself to where things, not with poor technique, but with good technique, pushing yourself so that you actually couldn't get another rep in whatever you're doing, not just trying to continually do chin-ups, but other exercises, different types of rows and scapular pull-ups and, different things like that. I had to consistently show up and work hard, not, to the best of my ability every time. That's one thing I loved about it is, there'd be days where I did not feel like going, I did not feel like working hard, or I'd slept terrible, or, and it didn't feel like I made progress, but I did. I also had to learn about properly fueling, and eating well. Because again, kind of being a teenager in the 80s and then a young mom in the 90s, it was, you do cardio, you do aerobics, and, you just do cardio and you try and be as small as possible. You try and be as thin as possible, You eat low fat, you eat hardly anything, you should feel hungry all the time. Well, that's not going to get me strong enough. I had to learn about protein. I had to learn how much I needed to eat. And then I had to quit making excuses for the way I was eating and what, my habits were. And when I embraced the concept that actually having control over that is so empowering. It wasn't that, oh, I can't, or it's easier for other people. When I realized how much of this was under my control, I think that's when I really took off.
Right. That's a huge problem in fitness and health and nutrition right now, is a lot of, well, I would just say like victim like acting, like you act like the victim. So hormones are probably one of the top ones, right? Especially for women, hormones and menopause. Like there's like, oh, it's menopause, PCOS. And it's not that these cases aren't real. And, I've had people ask me very specifically, so I need something specific for a woman going through menopause. And it's like, okay, nothing changes. It's harder for you. That's the prescription. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just like, I'm not going to take away from your experience of how that's difficult, but thermodynamics of weight loss are the same thing. Fueling your body is the same thing. All of the challenges you still have to overcome, but yours is harder. And I fully will say, like, I don't know what it's like, but there's no sign. Yeah. And so you've been through it. Like, that's why it's super helpful, because I'm always really careful on this to not say I know what it's like, but I need, women like yourself to speak upon it. And it's like, hey, look, going through menopause sucks, but the rules are the same. Is that fair?
And that's very fair. I know there is a range of experience that women can have. My experience was that it did make it much more difficult. But the other thing I tell women is, what part of your life has been easy? Everything has been difficult. Puberty was difficult. Junior high was difficult. High school was difficult. I had what I would consider to be easy pregnancies, but pregnancy wasn't easy. Childbirth, raising children, and I have a very supportive, wonderful husband. Adult kids are not easy. All three of my girls are grown. There is nothing about life. I think there's little parts of it in between the chaos and the storms, and that can be easier. But as women, nothing is easy. So use your life experience that, it wasn't easy for most of my career. I was the only woman or one of very few women in the office in my industry. That wasn't easy. There was a lot of misogynistic bullshit that went on that I had to navigate. I'd get fired in the first 10 minutes if I were to go back to, with who I am now, which is good. I wouldn't want to work there. But so much is difficult. So when, perimenopause, which I've learned probably started with me a decade before I thought it was starting, made things more difficult. So what? We do difficult things. Talk to your medical professionals. Keep getting stronger. If you need more help, by all means, reach out to whatever medical professional. And if you don't like what they're telling you, find another one. But if you're just looking for somebody to say, yeah, there's nothing you can do, life is just going to suck from this point on, your life's going to suck from that point on. So I found it very empowering to be told how much was under my control, embracing that, and then finding ways to free up some energy for the things that were really difficult that I needed to navigate by doing things that I could do that I knew were going to help me be stronger, more resilient.
That's beautiful. I think that's such a powerful sentiment. I've never heard someone say it like that so eloquently. It's just, your life's always been hard. Like, just remember, it's like reminding yourself that you're a strong person. If you have to go through a woman's life, it's fucking difficult, especially if you have to go through having kids. It's fucking difficult. You're strong enough. And that is the message more women need. Just the idea that it's within your control. And you're also like at a nice in between there where it's like, you're not going to play the victim. We're not saying you can't do anything. Like, if medical professions are saying, hey, it's just suck, that can't be the only solution. But it's deal with the suck, but know what's in your control so you can make it suck the least. Because if you don't go show up to the gym, you don't follow your nutrition properly, you don't try to get enough sleep, even if it's difficult, if you don't do those things, it's going to be way worse anyways. You're literally only going backwards from there. So I love this message that it's just seeking your own ability to control your situation and say, hey, I can handle this. This is one of my favorite mantras of life. It changed the way I looked at everything. And it's a Bruce Lee quote, which is, pray not for the easy life, pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And it's
absolutely,
it's just know what you're capable of. Just on that topic, I've had some women on here before. They actually opened up a menopause clinic in Winnipeg. And I was curious if you have looked into or been interested in some of the new stuff coming out around hormonal therapy for women going through menopause and postmenopause.
I've actually looked into that. I've done quite a bit of research or listen, podcasts, reading, the Girls Gone Strong menopausal certification, which I'm currently working on. There's lots of great resources out there. And I can be completely open about the fact that I am on hormonal replacement therapy.
Okay.
It's made a big difference. It is not a magic pill or patch or whatever it is that you're using. There's a gel, but it is another tool in your toolbox. And for me, it made enough difference that I could sleep better, because that was the worst for me. I know some women will talk about having the hot flashes, and that I don't think mine were anything severe. But I really struggled with sleep. I struggled with anxiety on levels I hadn't before. And when you don't sleep well, you don't cope well with anything. And it was like chronic, not just a couple nights a week, but it was getting pretty rare that I was sleeping. That helped me enough that I could sleep better. But again, I still had to get everything else in line. I had to make sure that I ate well. I had to make sure that I was moving, that I wasn't just curled up in a ball, or just sitting around watching TV, going to the gym, being around people, being in that supportive community, having people I could talk to say, hey, did you experience this? Did you, I had a few women who, when I said, did you try? It was almost like a badge of honor for them to say, oh, I never did that. Interesting thing is now some of them are, because more and more research is coming out. It used to be that you had to be on this right away or within 5 years of, being menopausal. Now the research is coming out saying it can be 10 years and beyond. There is benefit to this type of help. And I just think my way of looking at it was a little bit like what Jordan Syatt will say about experimenting. I decided to try this. Yes, there were risks, but there's also massive benefits. And I thought, if I try this and I don't get any benefits at all, I can always stop. Or if I, have some adverse reactions, I can always stop. And for me, the benefits were, I would say, not immediate. It took a little bit of time, but enough that it was absolutely a great decision for me.
I love hearing that. It's really cool to speak with someone who's actually had the full-on experience of it. And, there's just technologies that we're going to have in this day and age that we have to be accepting of experimenting, because it's no different than someone deciding whether or not to do, peptide GLP-1. It's no different than someone deciding whether or not they need to go on statins. And it's like, these are big decisions, but, statins probably save lives, and GLP-1s are definitely saving people's lives from obesity.
Absolutely.
And there's also drawbacks from that, because some people get adverse reactions from the GLP-1. So when you look at this therapy, it's just so great for women to know they don't have to age the same way. And the same things happen for men. Like the idea that you can live younger, older. And I mean, you always got to look back at some of these old movies when you look at like how old people were in the movies in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's like, the 40-year-olds look 60. And so you really got to wonder how we're going to age now, like how we can improve this longevity. The standardization of what a woman looks like when she's 50 and 60 could entirely be different, all because they're taking care of their health with new technologies. So you felt like I'm assuming you were already doing exercise at this point when you were doing it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been using HRT for about a year now. It's almost exactly a year. And I didn't know a lot about it beforehand. That's one of the things I've realized is women are so undereducated and uninformed when it comes to what is going to take place within your body, which is another passion of mine, is to try and get that message out. Because I didn't realize perimenopause can start as early as 35. Or earlier. There isn't a set date or time, or, it's kind of like with puberty, only it's a much longer process. It can be a 10 to 15 year process. And rather than dreading it, or, we're so taught through even movies and TV that it's just going to be hell. And it's like a death sentence, and your life is going to suck after that. And, it's going to happen. So learn about it, educate yourself, understand that, some of these symptoms, and I come to realize there's over 100 different symptoms. You're probably not going to have all of them. But when you start looking through them and recognizing yourself and recognizing, like, why am I feeling, I've never been an anxiety-ridden person, or depression or anger, the struggling to control your emotions, the lack of sleep, the brain fog, all of these things. When you start recognizing yourself in that, I remember telling my husband at one point, I don't know what's happening. I feel like I'm losing myself. That was likely a big part of it. And I didn't know. So learning about, there's so much more information now. It used to be a very hush hush, like, you don't talk about this. It's not a proper thing. Fortunately, my generation and Generation X, we could give a rat's ass about what is, you should and shouldn't talk about, and what's proper and what's not. It's, again, very empowering and I feel for the women of my mom's generation and beyond, who were just basically told, well, this is what happens at your age. The hemorrhaging that can happen, I didn't realize that was an early indication that, being at work and suddenly realizing that I'm hemorrhaging. I'm with a bunch of men, and I'm going to get my entire period in the next 30 minutes. I didn't know that was an early sign. Things like that were never spoken of before are things that are now being talked about at the dinner table. And I think it's fantastic. If you got a weak stomach, don't come to my place. I've got 3 daughters. My husband has heard it all. But I think these kinds of things there should be somebody you can go talk to, that you can say without feeling embarrassed or without fear of judgment, that, hey, this is what's happening to me. Do you know? Unfortunately, there's still medical professionals that I've got clients whose doctors told them, well, there's nothing, that's what happens to women. Well, yeah, it happens to women, but help them. So I'm not saying everybody should go on HRT. That is a discussion between you and your medical provider. But if you get information that makes you feel less empowered, find a different medical provider.
Yeah, it was a great sentiment by the women who opened up the menopause clinic, and they just said, we need to do better by women. We just need to do better by women, because it's just, they're told basically you got to deal with it. My mom even talked about the postpartum depression and how they were just deal with it. And it's like people have women have a really difficult emotional time, and it actually is normal, but just because it's normal doesn't mean it shouldn't be talked about and helped, counseled, and coached, because it's a very difficult emotional time. There's no way that your hormones are just natural and normal at that point, right? And going all the way into menopause, where it's like, it's just difficult. But then why don't we just make it a little bit easier for people to actually, women who already have a difficult time, to just have it more normalized? And like you say, we're in a great generation that things are now being discussed. The information is now getting out there. And this technology can change everything, because you have an opportunity that you don't have to suffer with age. I do think one of the major things that you outlined is it's no different than GLP-1 in terms of you better be doing the other stuff, right? Like if you're
absolutely.
Right, if you're not trying to get good sleep and you're up on social media or watching TV, if you're not trying to eat healthy, getting enough protein, if you're not doing the basics, most of that is the contributing factor to whether it's brain fog or whatever. Now, imagine how much better all could be if you're online, you're on point, you have all the things lined up. Then it's just like you literally for sure will live a younger next year. And I've heard a lot about the brain fog. That's the major one that I've heard most commonly when women talk about it going through menopause.
It's pretty rough. Yeah.
I can't imagine it, especially if you, what would really help that? Normally, if I have a foggy brain, it's like, I definitely need sleep. And then you can't sleep. And so I can understand how that's such a vicious cycle. So now it's been a year. Describe to me the changes that like you're feeling, like just, how you feel it, and you feel like it's like a long term, like how do you see it going down from here?
Well, I would say for me, I don't foresee myself not not using it, because it is, I think, a critical tool in my toolbox. I am still sleeping. It's now unusual for me to have multiple nights where I don't get enough sleep. And if there are multiple nights where I'm not getting enough sleep, it's likely something that I could have controlled and I just chose not to. Maybe I had some coffee too late, or I didn't shut my phone off, or, it's a lot of times not always, but a lot of times it's in my control. I am getting better sleep. One thing I have noticed is less joint pain. And again, I'm doing everything else. I had, it was about 2 years ago. I have chronic knee issues. I have some pretty severe arthritis in my knees, in both knees. One particularly, I've torn my meniscus, my kneecap twice. My right knee, I've had 2 surgeries on because that kneecap would dislocate and get all chewed up. So I have some chronic knee issues, but about 2 years ago, my left knee, which is my good knee, the good one, quit. I lost almost all my mobility. So to put it into perspective, to ride a bike, I think it's about 120 degrees of flexion that you need. I had 88. I could not even bend that knee to 90 degrees. I had imaging done on it, and this is where the power of strength training, I believe, saved me, because I was told, yeah, there's some significant arthritis. It's odd that it's less in your left knee, and that's the one that's really bothering you. But this is what happens at your age. And I mean, it's not that I've been super easy on my knees. I played competitive volleyball. I did martial arts for 10 years, not always understanding recovery. I was not strength training through any of that. So I worked very hard with, physiotherapists, a couple of spectacular coaches that specialize in, dealing with chronic pain. My right knee started really bothering me. I lost mobility in that one too. I was wearing a brace, a custom-made brace, probably worth more than my car. From the moment I got up till I went to bed, I could barely stay on my feet to coach. It was another very low part in my life, because here I'm thinking, I'm doing everything, I'm eating right, I'm strength training. I couldn't ride a bike, getting up and out of a chair, up and off the toilet. It was so frustrating. And it was almost like, you have a door jamb, something stuck in the door jamb, and my knee simply would not move. I believe, and I have nothing to really back this up except what my own experience is, using HRT, going on that hormone replacement therapy was another thing that helped, along with all of the intensive rehab and intentional mobility work and all of that over the last 2 years. I now have about 118 degree flexion in that left knee. This is 2 years of bloody hard work and persistence. But I do believe there's estrogen receptors in every single cell in your body, and there are millions in your joints. So frozen shoulder is one thing that they'll say is that it can be a sign where a woman going through perimenopause and into menopause will experience frozen shoulder. Your shoulder just will not move. Now, I got nothing to say. There's no evidence and no research showing that could happen in your knee, but your knee is another major joint. Why not? I think that helped me get more flexion, and I'm still working on it. I keep telling Matt that by the time I'm 80, I will be sitting my butt right to my heels again. I'm just going to keep at this. I'm not stopping, but I no longer have to wear that knee brace. Haven't worn it in months. I can bike, I can hike. My husband and I took a dream adventure this last May. We were in Morocco, and we biked and hiked all over Morocco with a tour group. And I mean, 2 years ago, I would have told you that will never happen. I was curled up in the fetal position if I was not coaching, because it hurt so bad. So I tell women, if you think this might help you, talk to your doctor. And unless I know there are some health conditions that mean you can't use it. I didn't fit any of those profiles. It wasn't the magic, it wasn't just using this hormone replacement therapy and suddenly my knees started moving, but I do believe it was a component of it. So no, I will, for as long as it is helping me and not in any way harming me, I will keep using it.
Well, that's a really cool story. And, we know you're a smart enough coach to use anecdote wisely, but still we have a right to it. It's, we always get it in the training and nutrition, especially the nutrition realm, where people will preach the anecdote like it is the way. And that's not the case. You're very careful saying, in my case, I think it helped. I can't prove this, but there was something here. And it only makes sense that your hormonal profile is out of whack. I've seen it recently with someone I know who, when she's on a certain medication that affects her hormones, kind of inflammation, and her knee just has a blockage in the knee that had ACL injury, had an ACL tear that came from when she was like 20. And this is like almost 10 years later. And so there's something there that, like, when she goes on her cycle, it gets inflamed. Like, it was just this weird inflammation, no mechanism outside of that, just that her hormones are not normal. So I'm on board with this for sure, that it only makes sense that when you have something disrupted in the system and how important hormones are, that it's not going to be like a normal like system, because whatever issues you have in any joint is just not going to heal at the normal rate that it could. So I love hearing that, but also just that dedication to the rehab process. And this is super important for anyone, but especially as you age. You are not defined by your injury. There are so many people. I mean, I literally had my girl say this today because she has this hip issue. She had a little strain in the gym. She's like, I'm old. And she's like 8 years younger than me. I'm like, do not identify. I just don't identify with any joint issue being about age. It's about your lifestyle. You're lifting weight that is more than twice your body weight. It comes with risks. And so, yes, you can have like an injury that happens from doing risky movements. If you don't want to do risky movements, you don't have to. But don't identify that with age, because then you're almost going to search for that bias, right? You're going to be like, oh, I'm stiff here, I'm stiff there. And it's like, I'm older than her. And even if I could say, oh, this is due to age, I just will not use that identity, because I'm only going to look for the bias for that identity. And then I'm going to choose options that support that identity. It's one thing to just say I'm an active person that comes with risks and that comes with injuries that might hurt your joints, but most of the time it doesn't. And the old people who really identify with old are also the people not training. And then they're getting these injuries from getting out of the chair or just reaching for something or just doing mundane movements or just falling. And it's when you get injuries from things that shouldn't cause injuries, that's a problem. When your back hurts from not working your back, that's a problem. And so I love that you're taking this identity piece and saying, I'm not defined by it. And just saying, like, I totally know it. I have a knee issue I've been working at since COVID. And it's just like, I'm not living with this thing. I will only try to work towards it getting better. That's the only option I have. It's the only thing you can do. And, I can admit that there's certain limitations that my body won't have after a surgery, right? It has surgery on my shoulder. It'll never be 100% again, but I'm going to make it fucking 99.9 if I can. And it's just not identifying with it. What was some of the process like going through the physical therapy? And what do you think more people need to really appreciate when it comes to dealing with injuries that, seem so difficult to get over?
I think the biggest thing is, and I used to have this mentality, is I'm going to do this physio or I'm going to do this until. It's that word, until. I'm going to do this until it doesn't hurt anymore. And then you stop doing it. I'm going to, because there's nothing glamorous or exciting or sexy about trying to rehab an injury. It was some of the most difficult things, because as a coach, I struggled with, who's going to want to be coached by somebody who can't squat to parallel? There's I could not demonstrate a squat. I used to be able to, but when this all flared up, who's going to want to be coached by me? So if I thought that I'm going to do this, I worked with Active Life. My coach's name was Mark. I worked with him for a solid 6 months. I didn't miss one workout. And some of the stuff he had me do was not fun. It wasn't stuff I liked doing. It wasn't, to put it bluntly, took me away from things I really liked doing, but it was what I had to do. And you know what? I'm still doing a lot of that stuff. I worked it into the things I like to do because it helped. So I think a lot of times people want to hear a short term, like, you do this, it'll fix you, and then you can go back to what you were doing before. Same with nutrition, right? Depending on what your goals are, you're going to do this, and then when you get to your goal, you can just go back to eating the shit you used to eat. I think that is the biggest roadblock, is starting something with the intention of quitting when it starts feeling better, or like you said, limiting yourself. I said I was willing to do damn near anything. If somebody said they could tell me and convince me that if you never touch dark chocolate and coffee again, your knees will never hurt. In my mind, it was done. It was, yeah. And I mean, I love my coffee and my dark chocolate. But I think a lot of times we look for the easy way out and we look for the quick way. And when I say I'll try anything, I worked with Range of Strength as well, he's got some great stuff. And again, I'm still using a lot of that. I worked with my own coach, with Matt. So, it wasn't just like one thing is going to fix me. And I'm still looking, I'm still searching. I want to go to, 130-degree flexion. I just want to keep going. I read a study that said the less weight on your knee, I probably at that point had between 8 and 10 extra pounds on me. I thought, you know what? I'm going to drop 8 pounds very sustainably, very carefully, and very slowly, and just see how I feel throughout this. Again, that was an experiment. And I had I put a performance goal in that because I wanted to be able to do 10 chin-ups. I was at 5 at that point. Wow. Talked to my head coach, to Matt, and he knows he can be completely honest with me. And I said, what can I do to get that 10? And he said, lose 10 pounds. He says, you're strong enough. It's just, we know that adding extra weight onto a chin-up makes it exponentially harder, especially when, your center of gravity for women, it's lower than a man's. And my legs are really long, so I got dead weight hanging there. I didn't get to an unhealthy weight. I didn't do it. I just dropped a little bit of weight, and you know what? My knees did feel a little bit better. I could do a little bit more lower body, and I got my 10 chin-ups. That was last summer, but I've stayed there because I feel better and because of what I can do, not because of how I look, not because of, I could get into that little black dress or whatever stupid thing women use to, think that it's going to be worth it. But because of how I feel, what I can do, less stress on my knees. I did walking weighted lunges for the first time in 2 years last week. I felt it for 4 days, but it wasn't pain. It was that, that good kind of hurt. My knees were stiff, but they were not painful. And to me, that's incredibly exciting. So I think limiting yourself by, I'm going to do this until I get to this goal, and then I'm not going to do it anymore. That's what we've got to get rid of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I really love how you said, just the idea is like, you have options, and like, you just exhaust all your options, and people will say that they've done everything. And I'm like, it's just physically impossible to do everything. Okay. Like if someone says I've done every diet, like that's not possible. You might've done a lot, but like, even when it comes to training, and especially rehab, I think the training realm is probably one of the more secure realms of, biology and research that is getting more consolidated, right? So like, in order to get strong, there's a lot more consensus on things. Hypertrophy is still changing, but there's more consensus. Rehabilitation is fucking messy. It is like, it is so messy. And you know what the worst thing is? You probably noticed this. Like, you have to have the willingness that you and I do, that you work with a therapist for weeks and weeks. Like you just said, it's not just until it's kind of better. It's like, you treat it like showing up with a trainer. Like it's an, physical therapist, but it's like having a personal trainer to make you move better, because sometimes there are acute issues, which like, you literally just happen to sprain your ankle one day. You literally happen to do something that was like an instant moment of impact. But there's a chronic problem. That means there's a chronic biomechanical issue, and you have to reprogram everything. And I think that there's a huge gap. I've talked to therapists about this before, that the out care, the actual just consistent accountability that ATs and PTs don't put on their clients is a problem, and the clients won't do. You know, when you actually look at from what I've heard about the research, the impact that physical therapy has is actually quite low, because the body will naturally heal a lot of things, and a lot of people just don't maintain it, right? Like you come see a PT or an AT, and I find, like, depending on the quality of the therapist, right? There's a spectrum of therapists, right? But they'll show you some exercises, but it's like you should be showing up literally just to do training with them, like you're seeing a personal trainer. And then there's probably some things you need to do for the rest of that year. There's some things you probably need to do the rest of your life, because it is the imbalance in your body. It is the thing that's probably caused this weakness in the system, and to keep on it. I love that you mentioned range of motion strength. So this is a very selfish question, but I think it's important for people to appreciate. So people have context, you know, they can search up range of motion strength. I've been fascinated with this guy. So he's also Jordan Sayat's strength, like mobility coach. He does.
That's where I heard about him.
Yeah, same. Yeah. And he's a fellow Canadian too, which is cool. So he does these big range of motion stuff, but it's like, what more people need to appreciate, it's not flexibility, it's mobility. It's being able to move and be strong in these range of motion. And I had done another one with, I forget the names, I think it's Mir from Beard the Best You Can Be. He has his Kin Stretch program. So that's where I really started to get into it a little bit, which is like really challenging the range of motion strength, like really putting contractions at the end, putting some weight at the end of range of motion. What was your experience like with range of motion strength? And what do you feel like you learned from it in that process of working with them?
I think what I learned from that is, like through the whole range of strength training that I did, was how much I was compensating. You know, I knew I had some restrictions, some mobility restrictions with my knees, obviously, but I didn't realize how much my range of motion was challenged in other areas until I went through the assessment that he had. And I realized, like, holy shit, my lower back is really compensating, you know, taking on huge loads, and it shouldn't, because my lack of mobility in other areas, my low back at some point is just going to say, you know what, enough. I really liked the progression that I saw just doing, you know, some of this, and it was completely different than what I was used to. You know, I have never trained mobility. That was just something that, you know, 80s, 90s, you didn't do unless you were in gymnastics, I think. I see the value, and I've started programming a lot more mobility into my own clients. You know, I have a couple of online personal training clients, more mobility into their workouts, because when I did these things, and Jordan Sayat's influence was key in this, saying, you know, when you work on mobility, you can access more strength. You know, strength is mobility. I had never made that connection before. So seeing that working on my mobility just made me stronger I found very exciting. It was like another way to feel stronger, to feel better, to not hurt so badly, to be able to recover quickly. Like, to me, it was just another exciting discovery.
Well, that whole idea of like range of strength, I think that his name is really valuable for people to appreciate it. And that's where I don't mean to, but I kind of shake my head when people say, oh, I need to stretch more. You don't. You know, it's just like, just keep your strength balanced, and it's going to make up for most of it. And then if you really want to improve the range of motion, get strong at the range of motion. You know, the biggest thing that made an impact, I've had bad shoulders from boxing. I've had tight chests since I was, you know, I mean, all I did was bench press mostly when I started in strength training. And
I think that's pretty typical for young men.
Very typical. And it was also just like, I was a little chubby, and I always said I didn't want to have man boobs. I want to have pecs. And so that was my obsession. But that literally curves the shoulder. And then I boxed. So I was just set in this position. And I've done a ton of different other therapy, but then my powerlifting coach had me do, and he told me about it before I even got to try it. When I finally tried it with him, he's like, you're doing like 15 reps and it's all about the deepest stretch that you can get. And you go really slow with the eccentric, and slow eccentric will actually help lengthen those muscle fibers better. And so really light weights, and we started out with like 15 reps. Then you actually increase the weight, 12 reps, 10 reps, 8 reps. And my shoulders have not been this good since I was 20. And
so cool.
It's 17 years. And it's like, I've been to therapy, I've done a lot of the other stuff, but it was adding strength to the end of the range of motion, plus, still building up the back. But I think it had more to do with like, my chest just wasn't comfortable opening up, and now it feels strong there. And now you don't have that inhibition. And that's what people don't realize is like, if you can't do it, it's because the body doesn't feel strong in certain places.
Right.
So I love hearing that. I think that's cool. I'm going to be checking out his program here in the fall. But I want to know from you, because this is Strong Ambition Podcast, last question. What is your most recent ambition, and what are you really excited coming down the pipeline?
I would say it has to, I've kind of pivoted. I still love my in-person coaching. Like I would have told you I'm not a morning person. I'm still not a morning person, but I have never once complained or hit the snooze button. My alarm goes off at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning if I've got the morning classes, because I'm not going to complain about doing a job that I love. I used to have to get up early for a job I hated. I loved the work I did. It's just that it was such a miserable environment. So I will never quit coaching. But we had an event. We put on we called it Strength Summit. And I was given the opportunity to speak. Matt asked me, he says, hey, could you do a presentation on nutrition? And I thought, a terrible topic. But I loved it. I loved the whole process, preparing for it, practicing it, and then doing that public speaking, I found really ignited something. So I would like to do more public speaking. It is a difficult arena to get into. I'm not expecting to make, money doing it, but I would love the opportunity to get out in front of high school and college and, parenting groups and, whatever, and do some public speaking, try and spark something in other people about, being more confident, finding things that set you on fire. And I think I'd like to host my own podcast. Matt and I had a podcast that we were co-hosting. I think we did 7 or 8 episodes. I'd have to look back on it. But, it was kind of one of those things that we had so much going on that we kind of put that aside. I think I'd like to start up my own podcast at some point. That as a way to reach more people. I think a lot of people get into, training or become a personal trainer because they think they're going to make a lot of money. I think, like you had said, the really good ones want to help. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm opposed to, increasing my income, not at all, but the idea of being able to help more people by being enthusiastic and sharing, especially the mistakes that I've made, and the things that I've learned, not what I know, but the things that I've learned, mistakes that I've made, the impact I've seen in other people's lives, I think would be a really cool next step.
That's amazing. I am fully on board with the public speaking because that's one of my favorite things. That's been my thing since I was a kid. I just had this one thing we had to do in school once where we had to speak in front of people, and then I just volunteered to do it after. And there's something very exhilarating. I honestly do believe there's like my Freudian assessment is like being the youngest kid, I wanted attention, but there's also I think, an art form to it. I think there's an art form to be able to put together words and to be able to captivate an audience and to be able to teach them and to be able to have them take something from it. And it's a very, very exciting thing. So I love that you're into that. And especially when you're passionate about what you do, you're going to love it. And definitely start a podcast. Like, don't even hesitate. If you're even curious, the best thing you're saying is like, you're trying to help people. Like, I don't know if this makes me money. I just know that I have fun with it because I get to reach people like you. I got to hear about TRT from a women's perspective. There's so many people who have reached out to come on podcasts, and I've learned so much from this process. And yeah, I think it does help my business a little bit, but I get a great experience from doing it. And so if you enjoy the process of doing something that could help you, just do it. Don't expect a lot in return at the start, but it's definitely just, I'm more than willing to bet there's going to be people who want to hear from you, and just do it. Like, don't even plan on stopping doing it. Just plan on doing it routinely and showing up for it, just like anyone else needs to do with their training or anything like that. And if you enjoy the process, it's always worth it. So I love hearing that. Well, Joanne, thanks for coming on today. And why don't you tell
Thank
people
you so much.
This is a fun conversation. I'm certain I'm going to have you on again in the future. We'll talk about your podcast. You ever want a guest, I'm happy to come on. And so, but why don't you tell people where they can find more about you? I'm going to make sure I put it in the show notes, but where they find more about your info so they can find about your first podcast.
Well, and that's actually why I said starting a podcast. Is this my little public accountability, I guess.
Yeah, put it out there. Put it out there.
So I don't procrastinate. You can find, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Average Joe Armory is, I think there's some underscores in there somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
On Instagram and Facebook, both are public profiles. So I'm sure you can find me on both of those. And yes, if anybody has any questions, happy to help. So, please reach out. I'd love to be, to be able to help more people.
I love it. Yes, for sure. We're going to put that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Joanne. We'll have you on again in the future, and we're going to keep you accountable to starting your very first podcast.
I appreciate that.
Thanks again, Joanne. I really love that combo. It flowed very well, and I love hearing from different people's perspectives on their journey in fitness, and especially something that I can't even speak to. The one that I just got to start with is coming from this crippling job environment where you really don't enjoy your life. She said it so well near the end there. And she said, I know what it's like to wake up for a job I don't want to do. And I do know that. I remember back when I was working with Hydro, when I worked in some construction companies where I was doing construction, and I just knew it wasn't leading anywhere in my career, in my life. I was doing the job I had to generate some money for school. And there was one day in particular where I woke up and I had just this, I don't call it crippling because I got up and I went to work anyways, but it was like, 6 or 5:30 a.m. and just this convulsing feeling like, oh my God, dread. That's the feeling. I had the most dreading moment I'd ever had in my life to go to work, to not go to work. I just really hate this. Like, why am I doing this? And I got over it. I went past it and showed up for work. But then now in the job that I have, and this was why gravitating towards being a trainer was so powerful, because I would do it for free. I do it for free for some people. And I started by doing it for free because it was such an amazing thing to just show people easier path, right? And so for her to have that transition into being a fitness coach later in life, to realizing what it could do for her, is super powerful. I just think that's an incredible story. And I think everyone needs to appreciate that's what fitness in group environments can do for them. Even though I am an online coach, like I do really think that starting with a group environment probably is good for a lot of beginners, because they need anything that's going to make them show up routinely. And if you haven't gotten to the point where she got curious, you just need to show up, then I think that's what's going to really be one of those steps. Like, I'll say this. There's so many different ways that you can get into fitness and make it a part of your life. There really is. There's not just one size fits all, no different than training or no different than nutrition. Sometimes it is hiring a personal trainer and developing that relationship and committing to it for a process. Maybe that personal trainer is online like myself, and some people have taken into fitness and they didn't need the social environment. Other people maybe need it in person, and I do have some in-person clients who need to see you there. And then some people want the group because they look forward to seeing the group. And some people, need to get on a plan with a group where they're working towards a challenge. There's so many different ways you can go about it, but it is so important that you just simply try to do something. And I really don't recommend you do it alone. If you've already been trying to do it alone and it's not working, I recommend you get some support. And like I say, it doesn't have to be what I offer. It could be something like what Joanne's talking about, having a group environment. It could be so powerful. So I think there's a really important story for people to understand how that can lead to a better transition and better mental health, just simply from showing up for the training, and just really appreciate how she was 48 when she got into it. She got into it late in life, and it led to a younger next year. If you've listened to this podcast before, I talk about this all the time. People feel like they just have to age, and you do have to age, but you don't know how much better aging could be. Because if you're not training 2 to 3 days a week, if you're not taking care of your nutrition, you just don't know how much better you could be next year and the year after. Like, you have years. If you have nothing, no basis, you have so much exciting progression to make. In the first 2 to 3 years, it's a lot of just progression. It's a lot of just getting better. And it's just so much more powerful because you're making progress, as we talked about. I'm talking specifically on the strength training. We didn't even talk about fat loss much in this episode at all. It was about what training can do for you to feel better. And the nutrition certainly will come along with it. If you're doing the training, do the nutrition as well. But just the process of being involved in that journey where all of a sudden you feel stronger, all of a sudden things become easier in your life because you go through that strength training 3 to 4 days a week. It doesn't have to be often. Right? It doesn't have to be super frequent. How low that barrier to entry? Some people, it is just simple exercise snacks in a day. Maybe you just start doing 20, 30-minute workouts 2 to 3 days a week just to get the ball rolling. But it's super powerful to appreciate that this change happens. And it happens when you show up for yourself. She talked about it with her pull-ups. I had to show up routinely. I had to get over doing something difficult routinely. I had to always keep wanting to own that process in order to get what I wanted from it. And, I thought she was going to lead into it. We didn't lead into it much, but as far as the physical kind of program that she did, we ended up steering into other things I really wanted to talk about. But it's actually a really important thing if you are female or if you're someone who just wants to improve their pull-up. So she mentioned weight loss. Like, the great thing about working towards a pull-up, if you can't do pull-up or many pull-ups, is if you're also working towards a fat loss goal, is like they're going to work totally side by side very well. You lose 10 pounds and you're working strength. You are simultaneously getting stronger and a lighter load. So it's going to literally overlap progression in a positive way. So the strength will start to get up there, your pull-ups will get better, and on top of that, you're losing the weight. So it's an easier load for your body to manage. But the thing that I thought she was going to lead into, which I heard said well by Jordan Syed, is like when you're trying to get used to pull-ups, is you really have to try super hard when you can't do it. Like, you can't just give up. Another thing I thought she was going to mention, she kind of did, but we didn't sit on it long enough, is that a lot of women and people in general, and men as well, who aren't used to strength training, who aren't used to finding muscular failure, there are exercises that it is super safe to go to failure. Like trying to do a pull-up and you just can't do a pull-up. Like, you're probably not going to hurt yourself on that. Trying to do push-up, you can't do push-up. Go until you can't. Like, that's good. Like, that's totally fine. When you're doing accessories, like maybe it's a curl or a side raise, as long as the side raise doesn't hurt your shoulder, like go until you cannot lift it. I talk about it on here all the time. True mechanical tension, which is the goal for muscle building effect, hypertrophy, you need to go until the muscle can't move it fast. It initially has some speed and momentum to it, but your last 2 to 3 reps out of a set of 10 are drastically slower than your first 5 to 6. And that's a sign that you're actually getting the things that you need in order to build muscle. Now, let's say you're just more concerned about strength training. Well, we still need to get pretty close to failure, or we at least need to challenge heavy weight. Like, don't give up on questioning if you can do more. And if you're having a hard time knowing how to do it safely, you may or may not have seen this on my social media. I talk about the prep, practice, push all the time. I get all my clients to do ramp ups. And this is all stemming from like a 5-3-1 protocol. So if we're talking about heavy barbell lifts, I think any novice should be using a 5-3-1 protocol. If you don't already have a good protocol getting results, it just goes off a percentage. Week 1, you do certain percentage, and you can look it up, Jim Wedler 5-3-1, and you basically ramp up. You start light, medium, heavy, max reps on the heavy. Next week, everything's 5% heavier, light, medium, heavy. Next week, light, medium, heavy. And depending on, your training cycle, you could even do one more week like that. You could do 4 weeks. He usually has a deload on the 4th week, which I don't think you need at a novice level. So I do the same thing with the ramp ups on a lot of accessory work, on all training. So if you're doing a dumbbell bench, incline bench, you're doing a shoulder press, it doesn't have to be just the main big. You could do it within your leg extensions. Do one set that's kind of hard, but kind of light, where you're getting more of just kind of the blood volume to it. Especially if you're concerned about the technique. So it's like, hey, I want my technique on my dumbbell incline press to be good. Okay, let's go light. Go for what you think would be 70% of your max effort, just ballparking it, right? And do a little bit higher reps, do a little bit slower reps. The next one, keep the slow eccentric on the way down and increase your concentric so it's faster and go a little heavier. So maybe you started at 40 pounds and you go to 45 pounds. And then that last set, you either do the 45s again and you do it for max reps, going way beyond the rep range you're already at, or you increase your weight to stay in the rep range, even do fewer reps, but just test it out on that last set. So the last set max out mentality is great for getting people a comfortable way to improve their strength. And so then from there, we got to shift into how well she talks about women's resilience and menopause. I have never heard someone say this. Like, this is so beautifully said. Our life's always been hard. It's hard through puberty. It's hard through getting into, having kids. It's just hard. It's been a man's world with a lot of culture. It's always been hard. So this is another hard thing you got to deal with. But that doesn't mean you can't treat your health with a high priority. It's only going to be harder if you're not healthy. So you have to show up no matter what to do hard things. Admit the difficult, challenge the difficult. And I'll say the same quote again. Don't ask for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. Embrace the difficulty, because that is your character. That's actually what you want to be defined by. It's a part of your story. Embrace that challenge. I think it's just so well put. It's a matter of people not playing the victim, but be the hero of your own story. I think it's so imperative for women to do this. And it's another really cool thing that there's things that are going to help you. So not only are we again, remember, we said it in here. The baseline is make sure you're training 2 to 3 days a week. Make sure you're getting enough steps in a day. Make sure that you're eating healthy. And then talk to your health practitioner about some hormonal therapy. This is a new thing that we can do here in Winnipeg. We have the Winnipeg Menopause Clinic. It's super important that people know that this is an ability for your health to improve, and for men as well. Men actually, they said it on the podcast that men actually seek out that clinic for some hormonal therapy as well. And it's a way for you to get closer to what you used to feel like. And then it's still going to be difficult, but it can make a difference where it's nowhere near as difficult as it otherwise has to be. We have these technologies. I don't know why we wouldn't want to use them. I don't know when, but I'm more than willing to bet I will be looking at hormonal therapy when I'm possibly in my 50s or 60s. When I feel that decline, you better believe that I'm going to want to live healthier. Little small anecdote or story I've heard about dogs' health. And so male dogs who are actually, they get fixed earlier versus later. The dogs who get fixed later actually have better long-term health because they have more testosterone in their body. Now, that's just one story, and I didn't, back it up or anything, but it only makes sense that you have the sex hormones that you need to live more optimally. So I think it's another terrific story to hear her case point that, hey, this stuff works. It even affects her joint health. It affects the brain fog, all these symptoms. And I'm just going to, hammer this home too, is like, especially with her whole history, like, go check out her information. If you're a female pre or post or perimenopause, like, if you want to hear her story, she's literally doing research. She's doing all her stuff on it. So I think it would be a great resource for you to go out to. And I do want to cap off with how important that long-term health is around joint health. How, again, she didn't get defined by her problem. She didn't get defined by, hey, this knee issue is my permanent knee issue. And I've had clients like, I guess this is something I always have to have. It's like, that is not the way to live your life. It's like saying, hey, I always have to be overweight. Nope, not a thing. Like, it just doesn't have to be a thing. Now, I think obviously there's a spectrum of like where your body composition sits. It's like, will I ever be a person who gets to walk around 8% body fat? I don't know if I'll actually have that within my personality that I would even want to. But I think as far as being a healthy body composition, I do believe that everyone has the ability to have a healthy body composition, and it's a range. I've talked about it before. For males, it could be anywhere from 10% all the way to 22% if you're living healthy. For females, it could be 20 all the way to 33% body fat if you're healthy with your practices and your lifestyle around it. And when it comes to, your joint issues, maybe you don't need to have a permanent issue. I understand if there's surgeries, you had a back issue until there's technologies around your back issue, but just no matter what, do not be defined by it. Have it. It's a thing. You're not that thing. You're not an injured person. It makes such a difference with how you're going to look for ways to bias your lifestyle, right? It's the reticular activating system. So this is, part of the brain that I've learned about more recently is you look for biases based on a certain thing that it's in basically your forefront. You're going to look for biases of, oh yeah, my knee hurts. Oh yeah, my hip hurts. So I got to limp. I got to do this. I got to avoid that. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not the person that does that because my knee, because my shoulder. And it's like, well, maybe you look for biases or how you can. It's like you have this hip or knee issue for now. It's like, okay, how can I work around this? Or what do I need to do for therapy so I can do this thing? And not being identified by the problem. I think that's super powerful. So I think this was an awesome, very good perspective on strength, on the effects of strength and health and even hormones on health in this episode. I personally even learned a lot from hearing her perspective. I hope you did. If you know anyone who's really interested, who, could be an older woman or man, but definitely an older woman who's thinking about or needs to try to get into strength training, is thinking about hormonal therapy, anything like that, please share this with them so that they can hear this message. They can be empowered by it, because I think more women do need to hear this message because, there are ways for it not to be so bad. And you can actually have healthier and happier, longer years in your life. And one last note, it is important to know that we are going to be increasing prices going into October. Now, I initially said September when I'm back in school, and I am officially back in school now, and the client list has never been fuller. The business is bumping, so my time is increasing in value. So unfortunately, as of October, the prices are going to increase a fair bit. But I want to give you this month a chance to dive in and have a call and maybe consider hopping on while these prices might be more affordable for you. So if you're really interested, reach out to me on Instagram, on the newsletter, in any way, and we can hop on a call, see if we're a good fit, and see if we can help you get where you want to go. But it's important you know that this is going to be official as of October. And I wanted to give you more than enough of a heads up before I increase the prices. I hope you learned a lot from this episode. Don't hesitate to check out Joanne. I think she's got great information, and please share this. Again, leave a review. That helps us grow as well. But no matter what, you made it to this point of the podcast. So, I got to say thank you. I appreciate you as a listener for always listening to all of the ideas we have and listening to me rant at this point. So thank you so much, because I'm always here to help you chase your own ambitions, because we know life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.